welcome back to Coral Talks with me, Caroline. Let's get started. Happy Sunday. So, today's gonna be fun. I have something, a new month is a new itinerary. I have something cool planned. It's not very fitting with my previous first section and second section, but we'll see how it goes. But let's start with the joke of the day today. Who is the most famous shark writer in all of the oceans? It's William Shakespeare. Yep. Um, that was a good one. I think William Shakespeare is really proud of me for mentioning his name because his brother, William Shakespeare, gets all the attention in school and in all the literature, but he never gets any of the attention. The holidays today, the holidays for this weekend. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, so thank you to all the people who sacrificed their lives for ours, and thank you to everyone who are selfless and who serves for our country. Aside from Veterans Day, this very important holiday, today is also Sesame Street Day, a throwback to my childhood. But honestly, I never really watched Sesame Street when I was growing up. I watched Wild Kratts, Caillou, those other shows, but never Sesame Street. So I'm not sure what I was doing and why everyone else watched Sesame Street, but I never watched Sesame Street. I rarely did. Anyway, today is also Happy National Vanilla Cupcake Day. Cupcakes are one of my favorite cakes, and hey, vanilla cupcakes aren't boring. Vanilla cupcakes are actually very delicious. Even though they sound like the most plain cupcake there is, they're actually, sometimes, depending on the day, a good vanilla flavored cupcake filling frosting is really good. Just sounds really good. I could use one right now. This is a lot of holidays for one day, but let's honor everything. It is also World Science Day. Hashtag STEM. Love science, love STEM field. And it is also World Immunization Day. So yes, go get your vaccines, your immunizations. Keep away from the coughs, from the sore throats. Everybody around me has been sick, and I have been really scared to get sick. It's just like coughs are everywhere, and I'm just trying my best to avoid them. But yes, it's almost flu season, I think. I don't understand flu season. I heard that flu season was during the winter because it makes sense when someone is more likely to get sick during the winter. But why are flu shots still available in February? And why are they only available from August, September, all the way until February? Why can't we do it anytime throughout the year and do it once every year? You know what I mean? And today is going to be a creature feature. My featured species of the day is going to be a Patagonian toothfish. It's also known as the Chilean sea bass, which you might have heard or you might have eaten in fancy restaurants around downtown LA or even in like Las Vegas or whatever fancy restaurant there is. There's this dish called Chilean sea bass. And a fun fact, if you're interested, it's not even a sea bass and it's not even from Chile. It was just this one guy, seafood merchant that was an American in the 1900s, visited Chile and tasted this fish that was on sale and decided to name it as the Chilean sea bass because it sounded more pleasing and appetizing than the Patagonian toothfish. The Patagonian toothfish itself has I was about to say ugly, but I'm not going to say that. Maybe just very broad and protruding face features, like a tooth literally that sticks out of their mouth, and big eyes that look kind of scary. And the fish is very big. It can be as long as 6 feet and as big as 200 pounds. So it's just very big. And honestly, if it was called the Patagonian toothfish, I feel like it would not have been selling well commercially, and it would not make its place in those fancy restaurants now that it does. It's really expensive too, so yeah, that was a good decision to change its name. The name was approved by the FDA in 1977. So it's hashtag trending in the seafood market. A little bit more about the Patagonian toothfish. It lives in the Southern Ocean, so around the Antarcticas and the icy waters. It lives in very cold waters. And it's pretty deep. It lives around 11,500 feet. Not too friendly, not in the friendly water zone. So yeah, and it can live up to 50 years, and I think it's kind of overfished a little bit with how famous it is and how trendy it is nowadays. Alright, I felt a little silly goofy, so I wanted to talk about and answer one of my friend Abby's question on how animals' brains work. Now, Abby wasn't too specific on what animal brain she wanted to know about, so I gave myself the honor and picked for her. Before we talk about that, though, what is the animal? And I thought I'd give you a little introduction. This animal belongs with the cephalopods, and they're carnivores. They live about 1 to 5 years. Something key about them is that they're really flexible. They can bend, they can stretch, they can squeeze through tight spaces, and maneuver and camouflage too with their surroundings. They can do all those flexible things because they don't have a stiff skeleton. They're invertebrates, and they have 8 arms. If you were wondering if it was an octopus, yes, it was. I'm going to talk about how an octopus's brain works. I picked this because octopuses have a lot of nerves, a lot of receptors, nervous systems all around within their 8 little arms, their 8 powerful arms. And to introduce you a little bit, aside from all the things I told you about, they can be found in deep or shallow waters. They like to live anywhere where there's rocks, sands, hiding spots, and easy places to camouflage. And their 8 arms are filled with sensors, hundreds of them within each little suction cup, and they use those suction cups to sense chemicals, toxins, environment, and food. Their arm has basically their own nervous system, basically their own system of neurons. They have mechanoreceptors, touch sensors, which helps them understand the texture, the shape that they're reaching for, and how their food feels like. They have chemoreceptors, which are also known as chemotactile receptors, and those allow them to taste by touch because they can sense the chemicals and sense anything about their environment and how their environments are through their receptors on their arms, on their tentacles. That is something really cool about them. The anatomy of an octopus, shockingly, when you see an octopus, if you Google an image, or if you just know what an octopus looks like, there's like this big round thing, this droopy round thing along on top that holds its 8 tentacles, right? Well, that is not just the octopus's brain. It contains everything from kidney, gills, their stomach, and just everything. Their whole entire body system, what is our body from head to pelvis, is basically in their little droopy round quote-unquote head. Their central brain is very, very tiny inside the octopus's droopy section. I'm not sure what to call that section, but I'm just gonna call it the central body because it's their body, literally. You may be asking, where is the octopus's mouth? Because if you look at the octopus's central body, you don't really see a mouth. The 2 little black dots are their eyes. Their mouth is called a beak. They release venom when they catch their prey through their beak, and that's their mouth. Their mouth is located underneath their central body. If you open the tentacles up, it's a round circle. Their beak is retractable, so it can be pulled inside the octopus's body when it's not being used. They can use their beaks to pierce, to break open, to chew clams, lobsters, any prey that they need to open in order to grab the contents. Just like humans, they are able to use their teeth inside their beak to chew. Like I was talking about earlier, vertebrates have a highly centralized nervous system. Our nervous system is in the head, in the spine, and it controls everything else of our body. But invertebrates, unlike these uncentralized brain, they have multiple neuron clusters, and those neuron clusters are called ganglia that are located throughout their bodies. It is said that one of these ganglia clusters evolved to become the dominant brain, the central brain that's located in their central body, and the rest of the neuron clusters operate on the arms. These, I was about to say inferior, but these not inferior, but these ganglias that are located in the arms communicate with each other with a neural ring. The neural rings help bypass the central brain so that the arms can send each other information to each other without the brain being aware of that. It's their way of communication, and it basically allows the tentacles to coordinate movements and wrap around prey, stick onto something, hold on to something without having to communicate with the brain, like how with the central brain, like how humans have to do. Now, although the arms have the ganglia neuron clusters that allow them to move independently, it does not mean that the central brain up in the central body is useless. That central body still allows a octopus to think about stuff like how we think about stuff, whether they need food, whether they need to move a location, and whether they need to camouflage. Another thing I wanted to mention is camouflaging. Octopuses are well known for its ability to camouflage themselves, and I was thinking how they are able to determine when to camouflage. Might be very obvious, but octopuses use their eyes to determine what color and pattern to mimic in order to camouflage themselves. They use their eyes to assess like the darkness, the texture, and the layout of their structures around them to get a rough idea of what they're going to camouflage. Once the octopus's eyes sees the color, sees the texture, sees the darkness, the brain send the information to the ganglia neuron clusters in their tentacles, which adds color information from their tiny fibers or color changing cells called chromatophores. Once these chromatophores are activated, they're able to change color and tint, become darker, become lighter, basically match literally what they are surrounded by. These color changing cells are located underneath the surface of their skin, and in order to help them actually change color, muscles expand and contract, which allows the pigment sacs inside these color changing cells to either become more visible, which is a brighter color or a brighter pattern, or become less visible, which allows the octopus's skin to become darker. I was going to get into whether an octopus's brain is similar to our brain in the sense of releasing chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, oxytocin, endorphins. But I am going to save that for another episode. Hopefully I can do it with someone. I have someone in mind that I would like to do it with. So we'll save that, and I'm very excited to talk about that more. Leave this how do brains work as it is so far. I know it hasn't been exactly how a brain works. It's basically just how an octopus works, because the octopus is mainly neurons and nervous systems. It kind of matches the topic of how a brain works in an animal. So last week I was talking about the ocean layers when I was talking about my creature feature about how deep the viperfish and barrel-eye fish were found. And this week too, I was saying how deep the Patagonian toothfish lived. Like, I'd say an ocean layer and like how deep exactly every single week when I describe those species. But then I was like, I honestly don't know what any of those layers of the ocean mean and what they stand for. So I went and I Googled and I found this diagram from NOAA, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. And it describes all the layers of the ocean and it was super easy to read. So here it is. I'm just going to say it. There are 5 layers. The top first layer goes from the surface to about 660 feet, or if you count in meters, it's 200 meters, and that is called the epipelagic zone. It's also known as the sunlight zone because sunlight is able to reach that area, and heat also reaches that area, which means that seasons and the latitudes and the winds, they all affect this layer, and so the temperature of that zone extremely varies during the summer, during the winter, in different regions of the ocean. It can go as high as 97 degrees Fahrenheit to as low as 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The second layer is called the pelagic zone. It goes from 200 meters, which is around 660 feet, to about 1,000 meters, which is around 3,000 feet. It's also known as the twilight zone because there are very, very little sunlight, and it is like the border between surface level water and the deep water. So it acts as a door that leaves the surface and enters the deep waters. And this layer is very special because the temperature changes a lot as well. It varies because it still has the effects from the top surface, and also because it has a thermocline, which means that this region of water temperature either decreases rapidly because it goes deeper and down into the ocean, and that forms a transition layer between the top jolly rainbows and sunshine surface with the dark, scary, black water zone. Because it has about no light, it has very, very little light, the species here start to have bioluminescence. So last week I was talking about the viperfish or the barrel-eye fish. Last week I was talking about how viperfish and barrel-eye fish, they live in the mesopelagic. They have bioluminescence, and this is exactly the reason why, because they need some kind of light to survive and to know their surroundings. And so in order to find prey, to attract prey, and to live their life in this pitch darkness, they need that bioluminescence for themselves and for survival mechanisms. And anyway, the third layer is the bathypelagic zone, and it goes from 1,000 meters to about 4,000 meters, which is about like 13,000 feet. It is also known as the midnight zone, so it is like constant darkness. It is pitch black, it's eerie a little bit. The temperature is constant at this zone because we've passed the thermocline. It's just around 39 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's like constantly freezing, it's constantly cold, it doesn't really change across the world. It's basically that temperature. And the pressure is very, very high. Fun fact is that sperm whales can actually dive down to that level, to up to 13,000 feet, for food. So that is really cool and really fascinating. I did not know that, and someone's going to go down a little spiral search later about sperm whales. But yeah, you'll be expecting it sometime. Anyway, the fourth layer is called the abyssopelagic zone, which runs from 4,000 meters to 6,000 meters, and 6,000 meters is equivalent to 19,700 feet. This layer, as you can tell from the name, the front part of the name is literally abyss, and abyss is like never ending. Apparently, scientists back then, when they were trying to research about how deep the ocean actually was, they thought that the ocean had no bottom. And so they named that layer the abyssopelagic zone because I think in their minds they were probably like, how deep is this actually going to go? And only a few creatures live there. Not many travel down to the abyss. I'm kind of intrigued about what animals exactly live there, so I might have to, I'll get back to you on that. It is said that three-fourths of the ocean floor, of the deep ocean floor, is in this zone. So this zone is basically, ironically, the quote-unquote bottom of the ocean for the most part, even though it was named the abyss. The scientists got their wish come true. And the fifth and final layer of this ocean so far, as we know now, is the Hadapelagic zone. Don't quote me on how to pronounce it, but it ranges from 6,000 meters to about 10,900 meters, which is equivalent to about 36,000 feet. It is absolutely crazy. It's really hard to imagine something that is that long, that is that deep in feet. But that, I mean, not every single part of the ocean is that deep. There's different depths, but this specific number that I was just talking about, how the 36,000 feet, that is located in the Mariana Trench, which is located in the coast of Japan, and it's super, super deep. It is the deepest that anyone has ever recorded. A few fish, very, very few fish live there because it's really cold, dark, and deep. Surprisingly, plankton does live in this layer towards like the upper part of the layer. I would be surprised if any type of technological invention went down there to the deepest area, or anybody even, or any man-made thing has ever been down there. I would be extremely surprised, but I would really want to see it. I want to see what it is like and know more about it. So hopefully somebody, maybe an engineer or somebody that feels up to it, make something that can go down that far for us to take a gander. I wanted to play something fun and a little interactive to end this episode off today, or maybe every single episode from now on. It's called the Sea Soundscape. It's kind of like What's That Sound on the radio channel 104.3. It's like I play a few seconds of the sound that comes from something in the ocean, or like a marine animal, or a sound that the ocean makes, and you guys could take a few seconds to guess what it is before I tell y'all the answer. Okay, y'all get ready for this. Let's see how it is. Okay, I just finished playing that. Honestly, that sounds more like ASMR, white noise, than anything else now that I'm listening to it. But yeah, I guess that was my little hint. I'm gonna wait a few seconds. If you guessed that it was waves hitting a rocky shore, hitting some rocks, then ding ding ding, you're right. It was some waves, ocean waves, hitting rocks. I wanted to use that to talk a little bit more about waves, just some fun facts about it. Other than, waves on rocky shores clearly being some nice ASMR, it is actually cool that in the way that it transports small organisms throughout the waves, and it's really relaxing too. So waves are found in a lot of places, not just rocky shores, even though that's the sound that I played. But if you think about it, waves are by the beach, waves are by cliffs, are by anywhere where there's water and land. It's really cool because it's like the border, or like the connection between water and land. I feel like there's something special in those waves that hit the places near land. Like, aren't waves so cool? It's so consistent and it's always there, whether big or small. They do so much, but they don't do it alone. That's the key. That's the secret to continuing to do something so good. The wind actually is their best friend. The wind plays a big part in creating strong, big, or small little waves. There's also some kind of physics related to it, but to simplify it for myself and for the sake of this, the blow of the wind, like imagine this cartoon like wind blowing, and the wind brushes the surface of the water. This creates a friction between the wind and the water. So this constant wind blowing um, creates this wave crest, which is the highest part of the wave. It's basically like the wind is rustling the water, making it wavy. I would assume some imagination is needed into what I just said because I was imagining it and it made more sense when I imagined it. But yeah, like I was saying, the wave crest is the highest part of the wave. You know how waves are like, when you draw waves, it's like a half circle. The top of the half circle is called the crest. Another fun fact is that waves, you would think, is like a half circle because that's how you see it and that's how you draw it in the most part. But it's actually a circular motion because the wind pushes from one part and then it pushes the water to go into a circle and come out and come up. So it's not a half circle, it's a full circle of motion. Like I was saying, the wind can cause big or small waves, and that is all dependent on how strong the wind is. Everything that I just said, to put a name to it, it's called surface waves or wind-driven waves. Speaking of winds and water, I thought of currents. Currents are also created by winds. What are currents exactly, and what do they have to do with winds? There are a few things that I am going to talk about that fall under the category of currents. The first thing is going to be gyres, then it's going to be rip currents, and then deep currents that maybe will connect with surface currents. We'll see. So, first off, gyres. What causes gyres? The Earth's rotation and wind are responsible for gyres. And what is a gyre? A gyre is a large system of rotating ocean currents. There are 5 gyres that span over different regions of the ocean, and they help move water along and keep the system going so that it's just a dead pool of water within the region. Gyres are larger and more permanent. They are like the celebrities of currents because in order for them to be acknowledged as the gyres that they are, they had to be there for a while and consistent. The 5 gyres that are in our ocean are the North Atlantic, the Southern Atlantic, the Northern Pacific, the Southern Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. Southern gyres, they tend to spin counterclockwise, which is to the left, and northern gyres tend to spin clockwise, which is to the right. The center of gyres are usually calmer areas of the ocean, and that makes them good homes or centers for debris and plastic. Those things tend to gather at the highest concentrations within the centers of gyres. There's this one specific gyre that's nicknamed the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and that's located, as the name says, that's located in the Northern Pacific gyre, and its nickname is the garbage patch because that is the largest area of debris, plastic, trash a gyre has seen. If you Google an image of a gyre and the map of gyres, you can see that there are warm currents and there are cold currents within a specific gyre, and that is because there are other currents that move not in a circle, that move just from one pole to the other, from the South Pole to the North Pole, or from one place to another, that brings either cold water or hot water along, and those currents affect the temperature of the gyres. Usually, each gyre has certain areas where it's a warm current and certain areas where it's a cold current. Moving on to rip currents. Rip currents are unlike gyres. They are not very permanent. They are temporary and they're just quick, instant. Because they're quick and instant, they are very, very powerful. They happen around piers, beaches, and form on the spot, and they are done within a few minutes or a few seconds. Rip currents are narrow channels of fast-moving water along the East Gulf, along the West Coasts, and just along the shores of the Great Lakes. You can spot a rip current by looking for a line of like foam or debris or just a darker area of water that's moving away from land and towards the sea. Those are pretty dangerous for people who are playing in the water or people who are swimming because it's very powerful and it's hard to swim against it because it's so powerful. These rip currents, to give you an image, a rush of water comes from the left, a rush of water comes from the right, and they form in the middle. That middle part is the rip current, and that goes towards the sea. Now, why does that happen? Because that's honestly very weird. Why do two forces of water that come from the left and right direction meet together in the middle and create this thing called rip currents? Before I go on to explain that, I must explain sandbars. As you might know, under a beach or near any place where there is land and water that connect, there are sand underneath that go into the water, extend out to the land, kind of like your stereotypical beach image, right? Because of the different directions that the water waves push, the sand usually are uneven. This unevenness of sand causes sandbars. Sandbars are raised areas of sand in the water, and that raised area of sand causes the area of sand around it to be lower. It makes sense because if you have a flat surface of sand and the sand accumulates in one area, the other area would be lower. Going back to explaining why rip currents happen and how they occur, it is because water constantly is being pushed towards the shore. Those are waves, right? As you could imagine on a beach. But those water waves, they need to go back to the ocean. They need to go back home. They need a way to do that. And sometimes the sandbars, the uneven plains of the sand, causes the water to be trapped around the lower areas of sand that are around sandbars. Because the sand area is lower, more water is able to accumulate there while it is heading back to the sea. This causes stronger water currents, which is a rip current. And finally, I'm going to talk about deep currents. Deep currents are also known as the thermohaline circulation, and it is not caused by wind, by the rotation of the earth, the temperature of the outside surroundings. It is caused by differences in water density. Deep currents go hand in hand in a global circulation system, also known as the global conveyor belt system, with surface currents. So surface currents happen because of the wind, and it's on the surface, as the name is describing. And deep currents happen low beneath the ocean and very slowly, and is not affected by wind like I was talking about. So deep currents occur when denser cold waters at the pole sink. And so these deep currents carry the denser water away from the poles and towards the equator. This process can take about 1,000 years for one whole cycle. That's a long time. And on the other hand, that keeps this global conveyor belt going is once the cold, dense, deep ocean currents leave the poles and go towards the equator, the surface currents, the warmer surface currents that carry less dense water, go towards the pole. They go from the equator towards the pole. So if you're picturing it, it's like a cycle. The warmer, less denser surface water goes from the equator towards the pole, while the cold, denser water goes from the pole to the equator. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my little spiel on currents and the four types if you're going to include surface currents. But those are a little brief introduction to currents, a little bit about some of the currents and what they are, what they do, kind of the differences. between them and just putting an explanation to their name. I'll be honest, I didn't know different currents. Honestly, I didn't even know what a current was. Even more, I didn't know that currents could work in a conveyor belt like deep ocean currents and surface currents do. And that pretty much sums up today's episode. Thank you all for listening, for still sticking here. That was a long episode, and I think it was a little confusing. Hopefully, it wasn't too bad, especially towards the end where I was talking about currents. I'm not sure if you understood that or not. But today, just to recap for myself and for you, we started off with a nice little Shakespeare joke. And then we talked about the holidays today and the creature feature, which is the toothfish, the Chilean sea bass. And then I answered Abby's question about how an octopus's brain works. Then I talked about the ocean layers, and I played this little game of sea soundscape, which then led me to talk about waves, and then I cleverly segued into currents and talked about the 4 different currents. That's it. Thank you so much for listening to this week. To me, myself, and I very much appreciate it. And I hope you have a sleigh morning, afternoon, day, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay content or not content. Love you all, beautiful people. Bye.